My parents pitched a tent in my front yard, hoping to stay at my house, but being the good son I am, I found them better accommodation at the local jail. The title might sound crazy, but let me explain. I was born when my parents were just 17 years old. They had to drop out of school to find work and support me. My dad was furious about the situation because he had dreams of playing college baseball, but ended up flipping burgers at a fast food joint. My mom couldn't care for me either because she worked full-time cleaning houses to make ends meet. Instead, I spent most of my time with a neighbor who became more of a parental figure than my own parents. From an early age, I realized I wasn't wanted. The only people who truly loved me were my neighbor and my paternal grandparents. My maternal grandparents didn't even acknowledge my existence. By the time I was 5, my little sister was born, and the difference in how my parents treated us became painfully clear. Even as a child, I noticed it. We lived in a tiny 2-bedroom house, so at first, my sister and I shared a room. Eventually, I was kicked out entirely to give her her own space. They told me I was too old to share a room with a girl. For the next 5 years, I slept on the couch. I had almost no belongings. Most of my clothes were hand-me-downs, and I barely had school supplies. The only nice thing I owned was an old gaming console my paternal grandparents had given me for a birthday. At 12, my parents decided to move, but they left me behind. Thankfully, my paternal grandparents took me in. From now on, I'll just refer to them as my grandparents. Life with them was a massive improvement. Not only did I have my own room, but there were kids my age in the neighborhood, and I finally got to experience a normal childhood. I made friends, rode bikes, played baseball in the street, all things I'd never been able to do before. My grandparents also spoiled me with gifts like newer consoles, toys, and new clothes. At 18, I got a job and moved out. But 2 years later, I returned to help my aging grandparents. I wanted to save money on rent and support them as they got older. During this time, my parents completely disappeared from my life. They never called, checked in, or offered to help. My sister vanished along with them. My grandfather was always cautious with money. As a child of the Great Depression, he knew the value of saving. He wasn't stingy, but he planned for emergencies. For instance, he wanted to build a bomb shelter in the yard, but settled for keeping a generator ready for winter storms, which knocked out power often. Thanks to him, we always had heat during blackouts. About 4 years ago, my grandmother passed away suddenly, leaving my grandfather heartbroken. 2 years later, I found him unresponsive one morning. He had passed away in his sleep. His death wasn't a shock. After losing my grandmother, his health had steadily declined. At my grandfather's funeral, my parents showed up and caused a scene, arguing loudly with other guests. My sister even wore an inappropriately flashy dress. It was clear they were only there for the inheritance. They hadn't attended my grandmother's funeral because there was no money involved at the time. When my grandfather's will was read, everything, his savings, car, and house, was left to me. My grandparents had disinherited my parents years earlier because of how they'd treated me. My parents were furious, claiming the decision was unfair. They began harassing me with calls and texts, demanding their rightful inheritance. I always responded with a firm, "Get lost," or something less polite. Eventually, they sued me. The case didn't last long. In court, I shared stories of their neglect and abuse. Like the time they locked me outside in the freezing winter for hours because I wanted to watch cartoons instead of changing the channel. Or the night that they went out for dinner and left 6-year-old me home alone, returning without even bringing me food. The judge was appalled and ruled in my favor. After the ruling, my father confronted me outside the courthouse. He blamed me for ruining his life, saying I was the biggest mistake he ever made. He even went so far as to say that if he could go back in time, he'd make sure I was never born. He blamed me for not being able to become a baseball star, and instead ended up working in a job where his name is on a label. He still works at a fast food place. He got promoted to supervisor, but his career has clearly hit a dead end, and there's nowhere else to go. I responded by telling him that my grandparents had realized what kind of people he and my mother were, which is why they disinherited them. I told him I never asked to be born. That was their responsibility. The only love I had ever known from parents was from my grandparents, and to me, my real parents were dead. For a while, I continued receiving messages, emails, and even letters from them, but eventually they gave up when I didn't respond. When they called me, I'd pick up the phone, put it down on the table, and walk away, leaving them yelling on the other end. In all that time, they never showed any real interest in me. All they wanted was money and the house. From what I saw on Facebook, my sister tried to be a model, got married, had 2 kids, divorced, and now complains about her current job. My father has been in the same job for 25 years. Before that, he worked at another fast food restaurant until it closed. His best days were clearly in high school. The same goes for my mother, who was a cheerleader in school and still has her old uniform framed on the wall. She's always complaining about her job on social media. As for me, I'm in my 30s and living quite comfortably thanks to my grandparents. I have no debts, I own my house, and I can save a good portion of my salary. I didn't go to university because when I finished high school, my grandparents couldn't afford it, but I found a decent job with a good salary that allows me to live comfortably. I've always worked hard, and that's something my grandfather taught me. He showed me the importance of hard work. I'm not rich, but I don't lack anything, and that's enough for me. Not having to pay a mortgage or rent has allowed me to save a lot. The problem now is that my parents have shown up again. They're doing it because they want my house. They've always lived in rented places, and now that they're older, they want to start saving. Unlike other stories I've read here, which inspired me to share mine, they don't want the house for my sister. They want it for themselves. A few days ago, they showed up at my work, making a scene and demanding to speak with me. They said they would camp outside my house until I gave it to them. I had to call security to get them removed, thinking that would be the end of it. But when I got home today, they had set up a tent in my front yard surrounded by their stuff. I asked what they were doing, and my dad said they would stay there until I gave them the house, which they claimed rightfully belonged to them because I had stolen it from my grandparents. I told them they could pack up their things and leave immediately, or I could call the police to explain everything, just like we did with the judge. My father said the only way they'd leave was if I gave them the key to my house so they could move their stuff in. I responded, "If you want to play that game, let's play." And I walked toward the door. As I put the key in the lock, I noticed my dad following me, expecting to get in before I closed it. I secretly started recording with my phone and slipped it in my pocket. I told him to move so I could enter, but he didn't say anything. When I finally opened the door, he tried to push past me. I grabbed his arm and threw him back onto the lawn. He shouted that I couldn't stop him from entering his house and that sooner or later he would get in, even if he had to kick the door down. I entered, locked the door, and called the police. My mother was standing outside watching but didn't intervene. When the police arrived, I told them what happened and showed them the recording with my father's threats. He didn't expect me to be recording, so he couldn't come up with a different version of events. The officers stayed until my parents gathered their things and left. I invited them for a coffee since it was cold, and I wanted to thank them for getting my parents out of there. Now, I'm thinking about installing security cameras around the house, just in case they try something else. But I'm open to any advice. Update 1. A few days have passed since my last post, and I wanted to thank everyone for their advice and support. One of the best tips I received was to upload a copy of the recording of my father's threats to the cloud, just in case. I've done that, and I feel more at ease knowing it's safe. I also considered trying for a restraining order, though one commenter mentioned that the chances of getting one might not be in my favor. Still, I'm willing to give it a shot. This weekend, I plan to install the security cameras around my house. The good news is that I've already ordered them, and they'll arrive tomorrow. My grandfather taught me so many practical skills when I lived with him, so I think I can install them myself. I hope so, anyway. He always said it's important to be self-sufficient and fix things on your own. We spent countless hours fixing appliances, furniture, and doing little repairs around the house. Thanks to that, I feel pretty confident with tools and following instructions, so installing the cameras should be a piece of cake, right? But the worst case scenario is that it might be harder than I thought, and I'll have to call a professional. As for my parents, luckily, they haven't tried anything else since the camping store incident, but I know them, and I'm sure they're planning their next move. That's why I want to be prepared. But the update is that yesterday, I got an unexpected call. It was my sister. In all these years, even when my parents were fighting over the inheritance, she had never reached out to me. Not a single call, not a message, nothing. So, I was really surprised to see her name on my phone screen. Let's just say our relationship doesn't exist. I don't even consider her my sister because we never had a sibling relationship. When I was very young, I barely had contact with her since she was a baby, and later, when I moved in with my grandparents, we didn't even talk. I answered because the number was unknown. After a brief and awkward greeting, where she told me who she was, she got straight to the point. I didn't recognize her voice because the first time I saw her as an adult was at a funeral, and even there we didn't exchange words. She said that I should give the house to our parents, that she knew I had received money and that it seemed fair for me to at least give them the house. She said she would do it if she could, but with 2 kids, a bad job, and a divorce, she didn't have money to help them. But I know that's a lie. I'm almost sure she gets alimony from her ex-husband, and from what I've seen on her social media, her job doesn't seem so bad. She's always posting pictures of her office, and it doesn't look like a bad job at all, so I don't believe her when she says she doesn't have money. Honestly, my sister has never been outright mean to me, but she's never been a good sister either. She's always had this air of superiority and entitlement, as if the world owes her something. Even as kids, when our parents treated me badly and favored her, she never said anything, never defended me or showed any empathy. That's why this call feels fishy. I think my sister might be planning something, possibly in cahoots with my parents. Maybe they think if she intervenes, I'll give in, but they're wrong. I won't fall into their game. I told her, as calmly as I could, that I wasn't going to give them the house, that our grandparents left it to me for a reason, and that I was going to respect their wishes. I told her that if she wanted to help our parents, she was free to do so, but not to involve me. She got angry and started shouting, calling me selfish and a bad son, saying that our parents gave us life and that we owed them everything. As if giving me life made up for all the years of neglect and mistreatment. I responded that parents who abandon and neglect their child don't deserve anything, and that I owed them absolutely nothing. After that, I hung up. I'm done putting up with abuse and manipulation, neither from my parents nor my sister. This is my life, my house, and I'm going to protect it. If that makes me a bad son in my sister's eyes, so be it. I've already spent too many years trying to earn the love and approval of people who clearly don't deserve it. So, that's the latest gossip, friends. I promise to keep you updated with any news, and once again, thank you for being there with your encouraging words. You have no idea how much it means to me to have this space to vent and get advice. It makes me feel less alone in this madness. It's not easy to talk about with people in real life because it's not like anyone asks you, "What did you do last night?" and you reply, "Kicked my parents out of my yard." It's much easier to do it anonymously and with people who don't know you. So if you have more suggestions, I'm all ears, especially if someone has gone through a similar situation and has experience dealing with toxic family members. Any help is welcome. And for those who have asked if I would consider moving, yes, I have. However, I have my job in the city, and it would only be worth moving if I could go somewhere else to get away from my toxic family. But even if I could, the truth is I really like this house, and it was left to me by my grandparents, so it's not like I could or would sell it. So at least that's out of the question. Update 2. Good news, friends. I finally managed to install the security cameras around my house, but let me tell you, it was quite an ordeal. I started on Saturday afternoon with all the enthusiasm in the world. I had my toolbox, the instructions, and a YouTube tutorial ready on my phone. I thought, how hard could it be? Well, first mistake. Turns out the instructions were in Chinese. I don't know why I assumed they'd be in English, but there I was, trying to decipher hieroglyphics. Thank God for Google Translate. After an hour of struggling with the translation, I was finally ready to start. But then I realized I didn't have a drill. How was I supposed to mount the cameras without a drill? So I had to pause and run to the hardware store. 2 hours in a hardware store later, I was back home, ready for action. I started with the first camera. Everything was going well until I realized I'd put it on upside down. Great. I had to unscrew everything and start over. By the time I finished the first camera, it was already nighttime, but I was determined to finish the job, so I kept going with the help of a flashlight and my trusty YouTube tutorial. Finally, after a lot of sweat, some swear words, and a concerning amount of coffee, I managed to install all the cameras. It was 2 a.m. on Sunday when I finished, but I did it myself, just like my grandfather taught me. I'm sure he was laughing at my misadventures from somewhere, but also proud of my perseverance. Now, moving on to less funny topics, I've been thinking a lot about the call from my sister and the possibility that she might be planning to move into my house with my parents. I thought I might try to get more information about it, so I went to Facebook and searched through my sister's friends. I found a girl who seemed to have several photos with her, although they didn't look like best friends, more like co-workers. I decided to send her a message introducing myself as my sister's brother. She seemed surprised to hear from me, which confirms that my sister never mentions me. We started talking a bit, and I quickly realized that this girl doesn't seem to have the best opinion of my sister. She told me that my sister is always complaining at work, treating everyone with an air of superiority, and always talking about how much she deserves a better life. What a surprise! But then she mentioned something that caught my attention. She said that my sister has been having problems with the apartment she rents. Apparently, she's been behind on rent for a couple of months, and the landlord has threatened to evict her. This made me think, what if my sister is also planning to move into my house? My grandparents' house is quite large with 3 rooms. It would be very comfortable for my parents and for her and her kids. I'm starting to believe that this is her plan. First, my sister tries to convince me to give the house to my parents, and then she plans to move in as well. It's crazy to think that they don't even consider that this is my house now. Update 3. Guys, you won't believe what happened yesterday. I was reviewing the security camera footage, and I saw something that left me stunned. First, I noticed my dad's car passed in front of my house a couple of times around 4 p.m. I thought it was strange, but I didn't pay much attention to it. Maybe he was just passing by. But then, about 30 minutes later, I saw my dad walking down the street. I guess he must have parked further down to avoid raising suspicion. He approached my house, looking around as if making sure no one was watching. What he did next left me speechless. He jumped over the fence into my backyard like a thief. Thank God I had placed a camera there. I also saw him approaching the back windows of the house and peeking through them, trying to see inside. I was completely confused. What the hell was he doing? Was he trying to find a way in or just spying to see the layout of the house? The strangest thing of all is that he didn't seem to notice the cameras. Or if he did, he didn't care. It's like he was so focused on his reconnaissance mission that he didn't think about the possibility of being recorded. I watched as he walked around the house testing the windows to see if any were open. Fortunately, I'm always very careful with that. Every window was securely closed. After about 15 minutes, he finally gave up, jumped over the fence again, and disappeared into the night as quietly as he had come. I immediately made a copy of the footage and saved it in multiple places, including the cloud. If I need to use this as evidence at any point, I want to make sure it's safe. But honestly, I'm scared. I never thought my own parents could sink so low. It's like they have no limits in their desire to get my house. On the other hand, there has been something positive in all this craziness. Remember that I told you I contacted my sister's coworker on Facebook? Well, we've continued talking, and I have to say she's an amazing girl. She's funny, and unlike my sister, she seems to have a genuine heart. Well, at least she seems to have one. We've been talking every day, and I'm enjoying our conversations more and more. The best part is that she's single. I know it might seem crazy considering everything that's going on with my family, but I can't help but feel attracted to her. I'm thinking of asking her out, even if it's just for a coffee and to talk in person. I know some people might say it's not the right time with all the family drama, but the truth is, I could use a positive distraction right now. Something to remind me that there's life beyond all this mess. Of course, I'm not going to tell her all the details of my family problems right away. I don't want to scare her. In the meantime, I'll keep an eye on the cameras. Now more than ever, I need to stay alert. I don't know what my parents might try next, but I'm not going to let them catch me by surprise. Thanks again for being there, listening to my ramblings. I can't emphasize enough how much it means to me to have this support. Update 4. Hey guys, so much has happened since my last update, I don't even know where to start. But first, let me tell you I was right. My parents were definitely up to something, and now I have the proof. After everything that went down, I decided to review the security footage in more detail, and what I discovered left me breathless. It turns out that my father's late-night visit wasn't an isolated incident. He'd been lurking around my house multiple times at different hours of the day, even when I was inside, asleep. In one of the recordings, I saw him trying to peek through my bedroom window at 2 a.m. He was tiptoeing, trying to see over the curtain. I shuddered at the thought that, while I was in bed, my own father was outside spying on me. But that's not all. Last week, I had to travel for work for a couple of nights, and it was a last-minute trip. I was so busy with work that I didn't even think to check the cameras. When I got back home and opened the door, I immediately knew something was wrong. There were boxes everywhere and things out of place. For a second, I thought I'd been robbed. But then I saw a family photo on the wall, and it all clicked. It wasn't burglars. It was my parents. Although honestly, I think burglars would be better people than them. I ran to check the security footage, and there it was, like a horror movie. My parents, taking advantage of my absence, had broken into my house. In the video, I saw my dad breaking the back window in the middle of the night to get in. Then he went to the garage, opened the door from the inside, and let my mom in with boxes and suitcases. For the next 2 days, I watched in horror as they gradually moved into my house. They brought loads of boxes and stuff, as if they were preparing the house for themselves. I can't even begin to describe the anger and helplessness I felt watching those images. I immediately called the police, explained the situation, and told them I needed their help. Taking advantage of the fact that it was early and my parents were at work, I began removing all their things. And when I say all, I mean everything, every box, every piece of clothing, every item that wasn't mine. I took it all and dumped it in the front yard in a huge pile. Right when I finished, the police arrived. I showed them all the security footage and the order I'd made with my parents' belongings. They took my statement and left, telling me they'd take care of everything. A few hours later, I got a call from the police station. My parents had been arrested at their jobs for breaking and entering. Apparently, when the police told them what I'd done, they had a huge argument, shouting at each other and blaming each other. It was a complete spectacle. It's been a week since then, and my parents are still in jail. My sister has been calling nonstop, begging me to drop the charges, but I'm not going to do it. I'm tired of their manipulation and disrespect. I think a little time behind bars is exactly what they need to understand the gravity of what they've done. I told my sister directly that if she keeps defending them and trying to manipulate me, she could end up in the same place as them. I don't care if she's the golden child. I'm not tolerating any more abuse from any of them. However, I do feel bad for their kids. They don't deserve to have such a toxic mother. I hope somehow this serves as a wake-up call for her, and that she starts thinking about the example she's setting for them. I'm still not sure if my sister was directly involved in my parents' plan to break into my house. My theory is that she manipulated them into doing it, with the intention of moving in with them once they had control of the property. But beyond her constant defense of them, I have no concrete evidence of her involvement. Either way, I plan to continue with the legal process. I want my parents to face a trial, and hopefully they'll receive a sentence. I know it might sound harsh, but I feel like it's the only way they'll understand that their actions have consequences. I can't live in constant fear of them invading my home and my life whenever they feel like it. I need to put an end to this for my own mental and emotional health. In the meantime, I've been working on reinforcing the security in the house. I installed an alarm, and I'm thinking of putting up a taller fence. I don't want to live in a fortress, but I also don't want to feel vulnerable in my own home anymore. I promise I'll update you all again once I have more news on the case. Update 5. Hey guys, 6 months have passed since my last update, and here I am to share the latest news. After all this, I've got some good things to tell you. First of all, the trial against my parents. After months of preparation and an exhausting legal process, the verdict finally came. The judge showed no mercy and sentenced them to 1 year in state prison. I guess they'll have plenty of time to think about their actions while they enjoy the cozy prison bunks. You can't say I'm a bad son. I got them top-notch accommodations, all expenses paid for a year. On top of the sentence, the judge also ordered them to pay me a $5,000 restitution for the damage they caused to my property. I don't think that's enough, but I'm just glad they're in jail. As for my sister, I still haven't been able to definitively prove she was involved in my parents' plan. Honestly, I'm starting to doubt she was. I know it's hard to believe given her history, but I haven't found any concrete evidence linking her to it. I guess it's something I'll never know for sure. But not everything has been stress and legal drama. Remember the girl I met through all this, the co-worker of my sister? Well, after months of talking and supporting each other, I finally gathered the courage to ask her out. And guys, it's been the best thing that's happened to me in a long time. We've been dating for 3 months now, and every day I feel more and more grateful to have her in my life. She's compassionate, understanding, and makes me laugh even on my darkest days. She's been a ray of light in the middle of all this chaos. She even came with me to some of the trial hearings, which made everything a lot easier. Now, looking toward the future, I'm taking steps to make sure my parents can't turn my life upside down again once they're out of prison. I'm preparing a restraining order, but I'm waiting to file it closer to their release date. My lawyer says it's better to do it that way, so the order goes into effect as soon as they're out, and they won't have a chance to cause any more problems. Since restraining orders usually last a while, I want them as far away from me as possible for as long as possible. I've also been making some improvements to the house, nothing major, just little projects here and there to make it feel more like my home again. It's been therapeutic in a way, like reclaiming my space and creating new memories. Thanks to Reddit and this community, I don't know how hard this could have been without being able to post here.